We all know that we should be exercising our bodies regularly, but few of us have a training plan when it comes to our minds. So what would you say is the biggest mistake that people make when it comes to mental fitness?
Well, I think you just said it, which is people don't have a training plan at all for their mental fitness. And that's really what this book is about, is trying to lay out, from what I've seen in my practice, what I see in the evidence, like, hey, these are things we can all agree on. If you work on these, there's a significant mental health benefit. And then I think the part that intrigues folks like you and everybody listening, there's a lot of new science. And there's a lot of new science backing up some of these clear lifestyle ideas. There are also some of the pieces of the book that really are from my experience as a psychotherapist, of sitting with people and talking in detail about what's going on in their inner world, and then seeing what kind of lights people up and makes a difference almost, I'd say, like kind of universally. We have more connections in our life. Right? That just lights people up. But you also see in the data, it's really clear how having more social connections just insulates and protects your mental health. So yeah, there's stuff that we should be doing. And I'd say, as everybody knows, the modern world is coming for your mental health in new and different ways. There's just more that we're up against. And so we need to take our mental health and our mental fitness more seriously. We can't be really in this role that we've been in, surrounded primarily with a lot of stigma, a lot of avoidance, a lot of misinformation, and in a passive role, right? We hope we don't get it. And if we do, we're going to be secretive about it.
Well, I so appreciate that. But when it comes to physical fitness, at least from the outside, like, I can describe what physical fitness, at least to me, looks like. It's a V-shaped taper. It's nice round, boulder shoulders, relatively low body fat percentage, adequate musculature. But what is
flexible? Don't forget flexible.
Being flexible, yeah.
Flexible.
What does mental fitness then look like?
Well, I want everybody listening to think about that right now. Right? Because we all know folks who we consider mentally fit. We've just never really been clear about it. Reminds me a little bit when I became a father. And I began looking at, like, who are the dads that are really doing it right? Like, they're really active. Like, what are the traits that they have that I want to emulate as a father? And I think with mental fitness, there's a similar way that in our communities, in our networks, we can often think about people who have mental fitness. Oftentimes, they're very thoughtful and emotionally regulated. They often have a good set of connections. They're engaged with things like having a hobby, Max, decreases the risk of getting depressed by 30%.
Whoa.
Right? It's just like, whoa, right? So, again, a lot of us maybe have let those hobbies fall by the wayside, or aren't as engaged with them, or have just let doom scrolling in modern life kind of slowly erode them. So when we think about mental fitness, I think there are the lifestyle habits, right, where people with mental fitness are going to have a higher quality of sleep. They're going to have a higher quality diet, right? We can probably, I hope, all agree at this point that the data on ultra-processed foods is quite clear, not good for our brain health or mental health, whereas the data on more traditional foods, whole foods, Mediterranean-style diet, however you want to slice up the dietary pattern, better for our mental health. So mental fitness is seeing people who I think are actively engaged in these ideas. And then the 9 tenets of mental fitness build on themselves. And they start with one, and it's probably the first one when you ask, like, who has mental fitness? I think it starts with people who are self-aware. That self-awareness is a bit of a maybe elusive trait for some people, right? How do we know more about the self? But there are lots of ways that we can understand more about ourselves. And it's such a central first step that I find a lot of people are often missing when they think about building mental health and building mental fitness, of really taking a clear accounting of who you are, where you are in your life, what you're up against, what kind of patterns you see.
How does one know whether or not they are sufficiently self-aware? I think I'm a pretty self-aware person.
Well, I think that we're always working on it. I mean, I think that you're a good example. You're someone who's in the media. You're always talking with people. You're always seeing folks present themselves and their ideas. And so there's a certain kind of meta level of thinking that you're doing. In terms of, you get a lot of feedback, right? You get a lot of comments. You get a lot of critiques. And so that, in some ways, being aware of that forces, some level of self-awareness. I think for me, Max, it's, I think, kind of grown and shifted over time. Things that I'm more self-aware of now, tendencies I have. And so I think about, are we sufficiently self-aware? I would say traits that you're not. You're in a state of externalizing, blaming a lot of other people, other things, or institutions for the problems that are in front of you. That's generally not the best way to go about addressing things as an individual. You see relational patterns that you can't break. We often focus on things like alcohol and substances, but there's also all types of pathological kind of relational patterns that people get involved in. I think those are some of the attributes where people kind of don't have the level of self-awareness or need to up-level their self-awareness. You get feedback that you don't expect. That's always a hard thing, but, often there's a little kernel of truth in there of things that we need to be more self-aware of.
Interesting. So if you tend not to be very self-aware, you get feedback that you might not necessarily expect, whereas somebody who's very self-aware can kind of see that feedback coming.
Hopefully.
Interesting.
I think that
that tracks. I feel like
self-awareness is kind of having a sense of your, let's say, challenges, and someone says, "Hey, I've noticed this is a challenge of yours." You're not like, "Wow, what are you talking about?" I think defensiveness. When we see people getting really defensive, and I would say like primitively defensive, right, where you get kind of riled up, there's a sense of something going on there. Not that that's always, a lack of self-awareness. It's just one of those things that, some people pay attention to those. When that happens to me, I get triggered or activated. Boy, especially at this point in my life, I really want to know what that is. I've done a lot of therapy, a lot of journaling, has been in a lot of different emotional states. And so when something comes up like that for me that I don't really, let's say, expect, I want to get very curious about what it is.
Let's take a step back. Why did you decide to write about mental fitness now? You're one of the pioneers in the realm of nutritional psychiatry. That's super compelling, an area that I tend to be particularly interested in, the role of diet and primarily I guess diet to modulate brain health and brain function.
Yeah, that's one of our fun connections. I think you and I have always been just stoked about that idea. And then, just sort of in awe of like, wow, there's like so much science that has come out since we met. I mean, all of the randomized trials in food and mental health, just when you and I met, literally didn't exist. Some of the newer science, like whether it's the lymphatic system or, just thinking about things like the microbiome, just like kind of new stuff. Why did I decide after all the nutritional psychiatry to think about mental fitness? Because just like with food, there's huge opportunity for our mental health, and there's a vast amount of new science that people really aren't applying. When you think about what people are worrying about when it comes to nutrition, most of the time it's not their mental health. They're not thinking primarily through a lens of how do I first take care of my most important asset, my brain. How do I first feed my hungriest cells, my neurons, right? Just kind of if you had a bunch of kids and there was one that was like really extra hungry, you'd kind of be paying extra attention to that. So just as there's opportunity in nutritional psychiatry for us to do a better job, these other 8 tenets I felt were equally compelling when it came to a few things. One, what I was seeing in my clinical practice. 2, what existed in the evidence. That I didn't want to just kind of pull some random ideas out. I wanted to think about things like connection or engagement or purpose that have a pretty considerable amount of evidence that when we engage in them, they protect our mental health. And then I think I just wanted to be more authentic. That I love nutrition, I love talking about lentils and pesto, but I'm a psychiatrist and a psychotherapist. I sit with patients every week, 30 plus hours a week doing psychotherapy, psychiatry, medication management. And so I wanted to speak to some of the other things that I saw were working for my patients. I think in part, especially right now, there's such, I would say, controversy about mental health, and in some ways so much pushback against treatments that folks like me really feel work well, medications and psychotherapy. They're not as accessible as we would like to some people, and so to many people. And so I wanted to offer a set of ideas and a framework for how we can take care of our mental health, regardless of whether you have a psychiatric condition or not. I didn't want to just have these ideas be for people who are struggling with depression or anxiety, although certainly these ideas are intended to help those individuals. But I wanted there to be a more robust framework that like we're all a little bit more arm in arm working on our mental health, working on our mental fitness and building it. That's what it feels like is missing, right? Like you and I could go and work out and do a bunch of physical fitness stuff together, right? We could lift, we could box, we could go on a walk or a run. When we think about like what would we do to work on our mental fitness together? And it's like we could think of some things, right? Going out to have a nice meal with some friends, right? Going for a walk and having a more meaningful talk. But it would require us to kind of thinking intentionally about our connection, one of the tenets of mental fitness, and just being a little more intentional about that.
What would you say are the biggest detractors to good mental fitness today?
I think right now there are a number of things that are getting in our way. I think there's misinformation that is causing people to doubt sort of who has authority. It's causing people to doubt themselves and their own potency. One of the big pushes of this book in Healing the Modern Brain is I really try to declare that you have incredible potential and incredible potency to heal your modern brain. That there's a lot that we all can be doing more of. And I think a lot of times I'm seeing mental health, when I see misinformation, kind of get into conversations about like antidepressant efficacy. And it's in a context where, I don't know, it's kind of missing some of the details, right? Like what are we often up against when people are struggling with mental health and get a medication? Well, they're also struggling to sleep well. They're not moving their bodies. They're eating a low quality diet. They're drinking too much. Right? So so I think misinformation about the potential that you have to take care of your mental health and build your mental fitness. Not that we don't want folks involved with professionals. Obviously, I'm all for treatment. It's just that we need more going on before treatment. Like the modern world is coming for your mental health is how I think about it. And I don't mean to fearmonger. I just think, look at the statistics. I mean, we've seen teen depression go from 8% when I finished residency in 2004. A decade later, it's 14%. Today, it's 20% of our teens struggle with clinical depression.
Almost a threefold increase.
Yeah, I mean, like, so we can't just kind of sit and kind of wait or like hope our kids don't get it. I think as all parents know now, we're trying to build a generation of kids that have more tools, more skills, more awareness. There's certainly... So I think that's one of the big detractors to mental fitness. I think probably a detractor I talk about in the book is how modern life has shifted. As we think about today, comparing, what our brains kind of evolved to do, we've got a lot of light pollution, a lot of noise pollution. A
lot of information pollution.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. Right, just that we're just it's intoxicating. How much you can take in, how much you can learn. How many people you can connect with, how distracted you can get. This happens to me a lot, like everybody else. The phone will pull you in. And so these are new challenges that we have. Yeah, I guess probably number one, we should just say the phone, but that feels like someone else's soundbite. But in terms of major detractors to mental fitness, right, I think we have a kind of misinformation about mental health. I think we're lacking a mental fitness framework or a preventative notion of mental health, right? We have the system right now where you wait until you get really sick, then you wait some more, and then maybe you come and see somebody like me and you do it with a lot of shame and a lot of stigma. And that just is not an effective system of care. Like there's no other facet of medicine where we do it like that. Most other facets of medicine, there's some notion of prevention, of engagement, of doing more to kind of take care of this aspect of our health, whatever specialty you're in. And so for us, it's brain health. And there's just a lot more we all need to be doing to take care of our brains when we're up against some of these challenges in the modern world.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's probably not doing our mental health any favors to have inherited an information environment where you're compelled and forced to be cognizant of the global environment in a way, that sounds probably very antithetical to the needs of our brains during our evolution. For the vast majority of our evolution, we probably evolved in a way to be cognizant, and for good reason, of our local environment, right? Like the handful of people in our tribe, where we were getting our next meal from, who we were going to mate with, and immediate skills necessary to procure the survival of ourselves and our progeny, right? But now, I mean, the world we've inherited, it's like, you know, where so many of us are hyper concerned with, you know, stuff like news activity on a geopolitical scale. And yeah, I just feel like that's probably something that we're not set up to do, you know, inhabiting version 1.0 of these bodies as we are. It's just, it seems like probably a lot to take on.
I think so, Max. I think you're speaking to exactly where some of this book came from, was just acknowledging like, hey, things have really changed in the last 20 to 30 years. We're just up against more. And the information overload is a part of it, for sure. I think also what you're talking about is collective trauma. You know, that when we are seeing horrible events from other parts of the world, we don't want to look away and ignore them. But at the same time, we don't have the emotional capacity or bandwidth to keep track of all of them. And we're very, in some ways, selective, right? There's horrible things are happening in Somalia. That's maybe not as top of the list, but it could be, you know, and you could go to different regions of the world and there's, you know, there's a lot of climate catastrophe, violent war, horrible things happening. So as a modern person, you know, what do you do? Again, you don't want to ignore that we live in a world with these challenges. And at the same time, as you note, this isn't exactly what our brains were designed to do. You can end up in a very depressed state of high alert that the world's about to end.
And our bandwidth for empathy is finite, right? Like,
it's a very good point. And it's a point that does not get made enough. It is right. It is not infinite. I am really aware of this given what I do for a living. I sit with people for 45-minute sessions, and it's all about empathy. It's about really trying to have more empathy than you ever imagined for another person in their situation, and really trying to experience it as they experience it, not as you kind of think they experience it. There's a fatigue with that. I find after so many hours, I mean, I've been doing this for 20 plus years now, you know, there's a certain number, I don't know, 30, 35, where it's like, yeah, the well runs dry. And so you're talking about this kind of generalized empathy that as we're worried about all of these things kind of out there in the world, we don't have the same capacity. We get in some ways distracted, and then we use empathic capacity sort of not in our direct community, not in our direct tribe in some way. So I think it's called Dunbar's number. There's like about 150 people in our tribe that we kind of keep track of. And you think about what that means now for someone like you, right? You have like millions of followers. You get like thousands of comments, right? You have people from all over the world who reach out, some who kind of catch your attention, maybe some who upset you, right? It becomes a whole kind of thing that pulls you out of your family, your friends, your siblings, your intention, maybe your next book. And so, you know, how do you regulate this? And that's again with this tenet of self-awareness. You know, for someone like Max were on my couch, right? I begin thinking about this very modern context he's in and what parts of it are healthy and great for him and what parts are maybe derailing him or overtaxing him. And for all of you listening, you know, that's the request of this book. It's not necessarily to say like, oh, you know, the screen and all of social media is evil, but more for you to begin with the self-awareness of how it's interplaying with you and your mental health and what you need to do to take steps towards more mental fitness. It's really asking all of us, you know, myself included, we can't be in such a passive stance about our mental health anymore. We just can't. And so the answer to that is to turn towards mental fitness, right? Where we're going to be building a much more robust sense of ourselves, our capacity, our skills, building more tools, as my patients say.
Yeah, but today it's like you don't need to have 1 million followers to be the target of rage bait. I mean, rage baiting is a thing that, I mean, I don't even remember that being a term that was in the colloquial vernacular 5 years ago. 10 years ago. I mean, it's a very new concept. Rage baiting. I mean, how is one to have good mental fitness in a world where rage baiting is like, and this is not just trolls on social media. It's like the mainstream legacy media. Like everyone now is like partaking in that sort of attention economy where it's like, who can stir up the most rage? Why? Because rage is what the algorithms of social media tend to reward.
Yeah, it's been a challenging part of this kind of book tour, Max, where I've found myself often pulled into very controversial subjects that are very layered and very important to me. Things like the treatment of mental health conditions, using evidence-based care, or antidepressant efficacy, or concerns with psychedelic movement. And it's hard not to get pulled into these things that, in some ways, pull us away from what's really so necessary right now. And so things like rage baiting and all of that, it's I guess for me, I feel like it gets us away from our truth. Nobody's really that angry. I don't think people really care that much about these comments. I think that most of these people who are kind of arguing, if you sat them next to each other, they'd probably mostly get along. And so, it's up to us. I mean, the algorithm is going to keep pumping controversy. It's really up to us. It's up to everyone listening to do more, to be less susceptible.
It's a great point, actually. It's like people sometimes ask me, like, why I even bother sometimes going into my own comments and rolling up my sleeves and battling the trolls on my own profile. Because people, I think, suspect that there's some kind of like emotional, like that I'm getting really wound up by the back and forth, but actually I'm like just having fun on the other end. Like, and same with the other person. Like, they're in all likelihood just tweeting from the toilet or commenting from the toilet.
They're sort of happy to get your attention, right?
Yeah. So it's not I think that it's not necessarily always as emotional and as there's not always like the emotional sort of thread underlying the comment, but often there is. It does. Social media is definitely like playing a role in our collective malaise.
I mean, it's also, I find that when those things on social media upset me, the important step isn't, crafting the perfect reply sometimes, because we can all get stuck there, but it's to understand what's upsetting you, what's getting your goat. I mean, that's really where I found social media.
What's getting your goat?
Yeah, what's getting your goat? Don't let that get your goat.
What? For a city boy, you're gonna have to explain what you mean by that.
I get your goat. I mean, I'm not. That's just one of those country phrases. Just don't let it get under your skin.
Ruffle your feathers.
Ruffle your feathers. Yeah, it's.
We have birds in New York, where I'm from in New York. So
okay.
Get your goat.
Yeah, it's understanding when that happens, why it's happening. I've found to be a really useful exercise in understanding the self and self-awareness, because when things activate us, trigger us, there's usually a kernel of truth in there. And so that's...
I agree. Is there a daily habit that you would say has the biggest ROI in terms of improving mental fitness?
I think it varies at different ages. Right now, for me, midlife, in my 50s, I brought you a little journal, because I find that to be a very meaningful habit that I've gotten into. I find myself craving it. I find when I return to those pages that are just kind of for me and understanding my process, I find that really impactful right now. And then there's quite interesting data behind that, Max. We engage in what's called affective labeling, which is when we kind of put our feelings into words, label our affects and our feelings. We engage in journaling and self-reflective practices. We see an increase in the functioning of our frontal lobe, or the part of our brain that's involved in executive functioning, decision making, getting stuff done. And so I like thinking about my journaling, especially now over the past 6 months, launching a book, is really helping me be in a state of more decisiveness, more clarity, getting more things done that I need to get done. And so I think for folks, I think especially in a life transition in midlife, I find the journaling is really helpful. I've got some prompts in the book. It's just something I've found to be very personal and very meaningful. I would say that each tenet has a kind of, they kind of all interrelate. There's a way that it's hard to say that if you're having a really hard time with sleep, that's more or less important than improving your nutrition. We know that insomnia, so having poor sleep, increases your risk of psychiatric disorders by 10 to 17 times. Right? So in some ways, wow, what's more foundational than sleep? Or what about movement? I mean, movement, the data is like out of control right now on how powerful exercise is in terms of being great for the brain, great for depression, great for neuroplasticity and brain growth. And so, I kind of looked at these tenets as they stack and they interrelate, and the more you can pull them together, right? If I can get you moving, not just exercise, if I can get you moving joyfully with some friends, building connections out in nature, right? That's definitely going to improve your sleep tonight, especially if we can get it going early in the morning. We just hit 4 or 5 tenets, and they kind of interrelate, and they stack and have a synergistic effect. So it's kind of trying to get into this more orientation of mental fitness, that we're doing these things to care for our mental health, and we're kind of building up more of our mental fitness as we do them.
Well, I love it. It's a very tactical approach.
Yeah, I'm a clinician.
Proactive.
You got to be tactical, right? There's like all this talk about mental health, all this kind of chatter about what to do. And then, the great thing when you're a clinician is you get to sit with patients, and it's very humbling, right? But you've got to do it. And you see real quickly, you can have all your thoughts about, this med or this diet or that supplement. What about when your patient doesn't want to try any of those? It's like, it's not like you get to quit. Right? So you always have to be thinking strategically and tactically of how to help the person who's in front of you according to their values. And it's one of my favorite things of psychiatry. It's really, it forces us to be engaged with empathy or caring for people who don't have the same values as we do. And it's just, for me professionally, it's just been one of the biggest some kind of processes of growth. So.
And how did you become interested in these more holistic modalities, these more holistic, mental fitness modalities?
Well, I think for a few reasons. One is I saw the way that we were approaching mental health, and the way that such a push in a kind of psychopharmacological and medication management version of psychiatry. And I like some of that in the sense that I'm a big fan of us advancing our tools, and I'm a big fan of some of the meds, especially when you see them work for people. The controversy kind of goes away a bit in your mind. But I felt there was a lot more we should be doing and emphasizing for our mental health. And I felt that people really needed a little bit more encouragement, a little bit more direction. And then I think in my last 2 books, a real upgrade in their science. I find a lot of people are still thinking about mental health or psychiatry just in terms of serotonin. It's like, I don't know, it's like a lot of other neurotransmitters that I'm thinking about, adjusting, considering. So we want to have everyone really thinking about their brain and their mental health in more modern terms. Right? That's where these ideas like neuroplasticity. I mean, when I finished medical school, we just didn't even know about neuroplasticity. Now I talk to patients about brain-derived neurotrophic factor, with this encouraging notion of hey, your brain can continue to grow, repair itself. You can give birth to new brain cells. This is a very helpful and hopeful concept if you have something like severe depression, right? Where the notion that your brain is just broken or stuck, it's no, there's a lot that can be done. There's a lot that can evolve. And we understand more about the neurobiology of that than ever before. So in Healing the Modern Brain, I kind of say, hey, let's take 3 lenses and let's look at these tenets. Let's look at all of these tenets through the lens of neuroplasticity. How does going in nature affect your neuroplasticity? How does having a sense of purpose or a hobby affect your neuroplasticity? Let's look at everything through the lens of inflammation. Right? It's such a big word now. Inflammation are our body's natural defense systems. And for some people, certainly they're having excess inflammation. That's part of the effect of all of the microplastics and all of the noise and all of the bad sleep, as we end up having a lot more inflammatory factors floating around. We look at people, for example, who have it's a horrible name. We call it treatment-resistant depression. And I've always found this kind of offensive because my patients work really hard to try these treatments, right? They're not resistant to treatment at all. It's that the treatments are failing them, and we don't have a treatment that fits them yet. But treatment-resistant depression, as we call it, meaning that you haven't responded to two known treatments. We find about a third of those patients have high levels of inflammation. We also see interesting data that if someone is given an antidepressant and they're on any type of anti-inflammatory, there's almost a double the effect of the antidepressant. So there's something going on. And some of the antidepressants like fluoxetine, Prozac, is a massive central anti-inflammatory.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, I wanted to look at these tenets, and we think about inflammation of, what does exercise do for neuroplasticity, inflammation, all kinds of stuff. And then the last lens is the microbiome, thinking about, again, this like new layer of science we have that in some ways is really simple. There's not really great microbiome advice beyond eat more plants, like at least 30 different plants a week, and, try out some more fermented foods. But we see a lot of people aren't doing that. We see 70, 80, 90% of Americans don't really meet anywhere close to the recommended daily allowance of fruits, veggies, plants in general. So, a lot of activity in the world of science around these tenets and the ways they affect neuroplasticity, inflammation, and the microbiome. And again, trying to get that science in there to help inspire people a little bit. I find it inspiring when I'm getting in my sauna and I'm thinking about the heat shock proteins, or I'm getting early morning light and I'm thinking like, okay, who knows whether I'll sleep great tonight? I'm a middle-aged man. It's tough, right? I'm doing the best I can. But I know I first thing in the morning, I kind of like put a flag in the sand, like I'm going to try to get great sleep tonight. And my very first action, I'm going to get really early morning light, and not through a window. I'm going to go out on my deck, my 19-degree Wyoming weather, and I'm going to look at that sun coming up for a few minutes.
But depression can also cause insomnia, can it not?
Yeah. I mean, one of the core symptoms of depression is insomnia, and it illustrates in some ways how depression is such a diverse illness, right? Some patients come in, they have hypersomnia, they're sleeping all the time. Sometimes it's kind of avoidant of how depressed you are, and it's just more comfortable to sleep. Sometimes it's just people have like a total loss of energy. More often than not, people have disturbances in their sleep. And a lot of times this happens to me when I have insomnia, especially in that kind of 1 to 3 a.m. time. It's a really bad time for my brain. Like I'm very negative, catastrophic, separate. I feel it's taken me a little bit over the last few years to get much more comfortable during that time. And actually journaling was part of it, Max. I was like, oh, this is like horrible. I'm like scratching the sheets. I'm feeling uncomfortable, just not feeling good. I have horrible insomnia. What do I do? And eventually I decided, I really needed to shift my approach. What I understood is I was sleeping through 2 sleep cycles, and then I was waking up. Like a lot of guys my age, I'd wake up to go pee. And then I wouldn't fall back asleep. And then really dark thoughts would start to come in, and just not a pleasant spot. So I started setting myself up for success, and I would get out of bed, and I'd go and I would often journal, or I'd go on a little walk around the block, or I'd have a little midnight snack. But I wouldn't try to think of it as awful insomnia. I tried to think about it as I'd heard that there were some people sleep in a kind of pattern where they have 2, 4-hour chunks with a little gap in between. Before we had electrical lights, they talked about this period where people would wake up in the middle of the night and have a little party. And they'd go dancing, they'd fool around, they just kind of have like a, kind of wild time in the middle of the evening.
It's like a sleep intermission.
Yeah, it was like a sleep intermission. And it was like, and this really appealed to me. And so I started trying to do that for myself, again, as a way, along with all the other stuff I did to try and, improve my sleep, really trying to kind of give myself the gift of a little sleep party for 45 minutes to an hour, and then go back to bed and sleep for 3 or 4 more hours. That worked really well until I finally finished my sauna. And then I found that heating myself up in a sauna about 210 degrees, I'm in there usually like maybe 30 minutes to an hour. I started sleeping through the night.
In the middle of the night? Like if you wake up to pee and you can't get back to sleep, you'll step into your sauna?
Sometimes. More so, the sauna fixed it preemptively that if I at 8:39 get into the sauna and I do 30 minutes to an hour in the sauna, I'll sleep through the night and I won't wake up.
Damn. I'm kind of jealous, actually. I wish I had a sauna.
Other than missing my sleep party, which I do. I have to tell you, I do sometimes now. It's really think about like I guess a mental fitness accomplishment for me.
How do you ensure that you're not like overstimulating yourself, like that you're still kind of maintaining a hazy twilight? Like, I feel like some people might be inclined to check their phones, and
that's I think the top way is to really it's not a time for my phone, it's a time for me. And that was hard. It was like I wasn't perfect. Some nights I definitely would doom scroll with the journal in my hand. I kind of got away from the idea that I needed to not overly stimulate myself. I keep the lights dim.
Because that can kind of create a stress in and of itself that stimulates you more than maybe like if you're used to just checking your social media and it doesn't tend to stress you out that much.
Yeah, I didn't want to be freaked out that I was up, in some ways. And I found, keep the lights dim. I think this is like a mistake a lot of people make. I find a lot of people with really bright lights in their house after the sun goes down. Like dimmer switch is a great mental health intervention. So keeping the lights really dim. And then I would say that, I try not to overdo it. I mean, this is sort of my technique, and I think I'm sharing in some ways to encourage people to be creative, to be flexible, to try things that, all the sleep experts, I guess, say that you shouldn't wake up in the middle of the night and hang out with yourself. It's like, I don't know, that really saved me. And it's really helped me kind of be more gentle and handle a period of insomnia that, was challenging for me. That might not be what works for everybody, but, what I find is with a lot of these techniques is I find we're so prone to take something. Like a lot of people will quickly go to a melatonin, which I think the American Academy of Sleep has told us, doesn't recommend anymore, or, get into a debate about which formulation of magnesium is best for sleep. And, I think probably a lot of our fix for sleep is in our behaviors and our choices during the day. And so.
Yeah. I love to use a little THC gummy.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that? Dr. Ramsey approved or nay?
Well,
it's low dose, and I never mess with THC socially, but sometimes I find that.
If we're gonna hang out with you stoned, it has to be we have to spend the night, so you have your gummies and get you to.
Yeah, I mean, no, I THC makes me very introspective, to an uncomfortable degree. And it makes me very paranoid. But where it is very effective for me is sometimes if I have difficulty at the end of the day turning off my brain. That sort of anxiety where you feel like your brain just won't shut off. I have a gummy. There's a brand called Wild. I have no affiliation whatsoever. But it's got a little bit of THC, CBD, and CBN. And so I'll usually cut the gummies into quarters. And so 1/4 gives me I think 2.5 milligrams of THC. And I'll take 1 or 2 of those quarters. And I feel like it's a great, anti-insomnia for me.
You're talking about a space that's really interesting because we have limited data. And so you're talking about taking cannabis in a form that we've not really ever studied, right? That it's edible. So all of the risk for cannabis that we know about is really related to smoking it, or related to being a teen and getting a psychotic disorder. The major risk of cannabis is really around teenage psychosis. Think about, for example, a recent, I think it was a New England Journal looking at increase in cardiovascular risk for cannabis users, right? But that wasn't for people taking gummies. That was for people who were smoking bongs. I think what you're talking about, especially because you're here in California, is how you've been able to kind of experiment and find some solutions that work for you. And so one, it's important to note you're talking about what we would call a full spectrum cannabis product. So you have THC, there's the Delta-9 that gets you, high or stoned, or, in your case, a little bit introspective and paranoid. Everybody, you can come by later. Max and I are going to be paranoid, introspective, and journaling.
Not talking to one another.
Not talking, just journaling.
Looking out into space.
Right, you have CBD in there, so you've got cannabidiol, and so cannabis has a lot of other compounds besides THC in it. You probably also have some of the terpenes in there, and then CBN. So when you look at some of these cannabinoids, CBN, CBG, there are more kind of effects, soporific, putting people to sleep effects. And I just saw a study my team passed me on CBG, looking at mood and anti-anxiety effects. And so again, just a very, a nuanced and layered space, right? When we think about cannabis and how it affects our mental health, there are certainly risks there. I think probably one of them is that people who are having symptoms of depression or anxiety get some quick relief sometimes from cannabis products, but they don't get kind of full treatment. And so, for someone like you with occasional insomnia, it kind of works. If it's like every night and, there's maybe something else going on, that's where we'd want to just, kind of attend to that in some way. It's kind of like, any symptom, if you find a quick solution, it's great. You don't want to miss kind of underlying symptoms.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Just like maybe once or twice a week at most. I also find it really helpful to curate my bedroom environment to be really conducive to sleep.
Yeah.
I have my bedroom is lit only by a red light bulb. I mean, I have ceiling lights, but I hardly ever turn those on. Instead, I have a lamp by my bed that has a red light bulb in it. So almost as soon as the sun goes down like that, I'll put that light on if I need to be in and out of my bedroom. And certainly in the moments before bed, my room looks like a strip club, but I'm not mad at it. I mean, it's just completely red. And in my bathroom, if I have to use I brush my teeth before I go to sleep. If I wake up to pee, which I often do in the middle of the night, I never turn on the overhead light. I don't turn on the lights in my bathroom. I keep the lights off. I find that all to be, those kind of modifications. They're very inexpensive modifications. And I don't know, for me, do you do anything in your own bedroom environment?
Yep. And it's a huge part of healing the modern brain is kind of asking people to take an accounting of their bedroom environment and to think about some of the big factors. Light is one. This just happened to me where I realized that with the HEPA filter we had next to the bed, good quality air, really great. You're sleeping for 8 hours. Why not make it absolutely pristine, plastic-free, wonderful air, easy to do, a couple $100, get a HEPA filter. Except my HEPA filter had this light. And I realized, it just was putting a lot of lumens in my bedroom. And so they're just silly little things light, air quality.
Do you use an air doctor?
I've just got the Koway filter. And I have no affiliations with any of these brands, just to say that. And then what's the other factor for sleep is noise. So often that our sleep cycling gets disturbed because, there's some exterior noise. And so kind of go through this in the book really, in a straightforward and simple way, trying to think about actionables, right? Things you can do. Like Max is a good example of, he's got his bedroom dialed in. I also think there's a little bit of I guess I almost call it placebo effect, but I like it, which is that you're doing stuff intentionally. You've set up a bedroom that you feel good about. You know that you're making choices that help support your sleep. And I think that makes a difference for us. It's like when I eat the brain food. Yeah, I know it's got all the magnesium and folate and vitamin E and omega-3 fats. That's great. But there's also that boost I get of, hey, I made the right choice. Hey, I'm living according to my values. Hey, I'm doing everything I can to take care of my brain health and my mental health.
Yeah, totally. If you had to create a mental fitness workout plan, what would be, I suppose you've already touched on journaling.
Start with some journaling.
Yeah, what would be some other staple exercises?
Yeah, there'd be a bunch in there. Each of the tenets has some exercises that I want people to do. I guess the one that pops into my mind is around connection. Right? We know we've had this huge signal and concern about social isolation, huge epidemic in America. A lot of people, don't feel they have a close confidant that they can speak to. A lot of folks notice their social network is really kind of diminishing in quality and quantity, just not as many contacts, not feeling as close to those people, feeling more controversy in relationships. And so I really like the notion of people being quite intentional about building their connections and mapping them out. I talk about kind of our connection web in the book, whereas when I sit with patients and I'm assessing, what's going on, I'm thinking about the connections in someone's life, right? How are they connected to themselves, right? What's their kind of stance with themselves? Are they kind? Are they harsh? Are they really engaged and aware? What's their connection like with the folks in their immediate circle, right? Loved ones, family members, close friends. Who are those people, right? If you come to me and I never hear about a friend, I don't hear about anybody in your family, I'm going to ask, but it's just different than someone who comes in and sits right down and kind of maps out a bunch of interpersonal connections. And then there are other things like institutions, where we get a lot of comfort. I live in this wonderful community now, Jackson, Wyoming, and they've built this amazing new recreation center, and it's just always full. So as my patients there are struggling with like loneliness or being in a new community or not being connected, there's just some easy places. Hey, why don't you go to climbing night? I've got these great nights where they turn out all the lights, so everyone like climbs with a headlamp, or they have some singles night. So just ways that lots of people in this community are really focused on building community. I mean, it's like no place I've ever seen, really. It's really, Jackson gets a lot of, it's a tough place to live in a lot of ways, but wow, I mean, there are like 8 or 9 large nonprofits focused on mental health. There's a community crisis line. All of the police officers locally are crisis trained, meaning they have mental health training. They have really specific training on how to intervene. So it's an incredible place. I'll just say that part of transitioning, moving there for me has been really thinking intentionally about my connections. Like I was asked to join the board of the Teton Youth and Family Services, and it was so like meaningful and important for me, both of feeling I'm contributing to the community, but also just having some really clear times on my calendar to go and connect with other community leaders and build relationships and be known and be able to contribute someplace. So yeah, connection is where I definitely would want people thinking about, because there's just such a huge benefit for you and your mental health.
Do you know if there's any data comparing the anti-loneliness effect of engaging with online communities compared to IRL communities?
That's a great question. I don't know the specific data. I could certainly wax on a little bit about it, and I think that we shouldn't dismiss online relationships. I have a lot of online relationships with patients who I see virtually. And over the years, I've come to appreciate that in-person therapy is a little bit of a different beast than teletherapy. What people talk about and kind of the process they get into, it can be very similar and kind of overlapping, but they're a little bit different. I would say that we're all big fans of IRL relationships, in part because they bring so much more to the encounter. You and I walked in and saw each other here and gave each other a hug. It was like there's a way of sitting here with you in person, right? I could be having the same thing on a screen, but I don't know, it wouldn't be as meaningful to me.
Not the same.
Yeah, and so there's, I think we want to also just see what's happened. Right? We're supposed to be more connected than ever. I have more friends, followers, than I've ever had before. And at the same time, more and more people are feeling lonely, isolated, disconnected. And so, I think that I'm really talking about in-person and real connections, or digital connections that are extra meaningful. I think that I see this sometimes, groups that will meet up intentionally, and they'll maybe have once or twice a year get together in person, but they'll be by Zoom. Or we'll see this sometimes in the psychedelic community, where there'll be a retreat where people will have journeys on like a weekend, let's say, but beforehand, at least the good experiences, there's a lot of prep, there's a lot of group process beforehand, and it can be done digitally. And again, probably not quite as powerful as in person, but functional.
But can be like supplementary.
Yeah, I guess it's also a question of like the difference between optimal and functional. Like, can I do a great mental health eval by telemedicine? Yeah, I think so. It's functional. Like, can I do my best mental health eval just by telemedicine? It's like, I I don't think so, because my best mental health eval includes how I feel sitting with you, what it's like when I open the door, or what just kind of my experiences with you. That it, you get some of that digitally, but it's just not quite as palpable or as intense as a clinician as when I sit with you. So, but yeah, I think this book is really saying like, hey, wake up call. We went through the pandemic. We've got assault on our senses of so much information. We've got so much seduction and excitement online, so much visual stimulation. You have got to, like we say in basketball, you got to box this out. You've got to create some space for in-person IRL relationships. You've got to create space and time in your schedule, just like you do for exercise, to build and deepen. Right? It's not just like acquiring new connections. You got to deepen them, which takes work, time, effort. Right? We all know those relationships in our life that we've spent time on. They last. There's consistency. There's investment. And so I hope that connection is one of those tenets that people really pay attention to and then get more intentional about in their own life. I mean, I think a lot of my pleasure as a therapist is you get to really encourage and see people build more robust and deeper networks in their life, and that is a huge part of healing.
Yeah, I'm just wondering because I mean sometimes I get into these busy spells where I've got so much work, and sometimes hours will pass in the day before I've had any real human interaction. And I know, my little brother who now has two babies, two toddlers running around, and
Uncle Max.
Yeah, and his partner, his girlfriend, his baby mama. They now live in Las Vegas, and they don't necessarily have like the social network there that they had here in Los Angeles. And so I'm just wondering for people like that, who have like busy real life obligations, whether to children or to jobs or what have you, like what can be done to, used as a supplement for some of these IRL interactions.
Well, I think there has to be an intentionality around it. There's, just like mindfulness when we eat, right? You can go downstairs and eat a nice kale salad and a nice piece of wild salmon.
You love kale.
I do love kale, yeah. I mean, I don't know why people, I even got Dave. Do you know Dave Asprey has a favorite kale?
Does he?
Like, yeah.
I thought he hates kale.
He
That's been his shtick for like.
He had me on.
Since I met him.
We had. I think it was probably my best kale consultation. And everybody, I wrote a book, 50 Shades of Kale. I co-founded National Kale Day way back in the day. I had a little kale problem, but I do like the kale.
Big hit in the vegan BDSM community.
It's it was actually a really meaningful moment that Dave Asprey, the anti-kale guy, and me, Mr. Kale, we actually have the same favorite type of kale, lacinato. And
is that like the dinosaur kale?
Yeah, well, he calls it dinosaur kale, but I think lacinato is a better brand for it. And lacinato are those long, like darker green leaves, usually great to chiffonade, roll them up, and just cut really thin. The point being around intention, that if you go downstairs, you're still stressed out, you're kind of in your head, right? You're still working, you just mindlessly eat. The plate can be empty and you sort of haven't paid attention at all, right? You could go downstairs and in the same amount of time, maybe a couple more minutes, take a deep breath, settle yourself down, have a little gratitude for your food. In doing that, you're going to now chew your food better. So actually you're going to get a lot more nutrition out of it. You're going to digest it better. It's, everything's going to work a little bit better. You're going to settle down, right? So you're going to have a better experience. You're going to be living more according to those values that you have. And so again, it's the same act. So when you're asking about in sort of making the note, hey, folks are busy. Like, how do we actually fit some hangout time in our life? I think it's where this intentionality around a mental fitness framework is what I'm asking people to do. Whether it's yourself, where as one of my patients calls, he's in the submarine, right? It's just like work and on the screen, and it's kind of grinding. You've got to build stuff in, right? You've got to get something in your morning, whether it's getting to an exercise class with a friend, or going for a walk on the beach, or meeting up with a creative group, or doing something not work related. Otherwise you're just going to wake up every morning and go, and start grinding. And you have a entrepreneurial, flexible schedule. So in some ways, you're like me, like I control my schedule. So when I see it's, I'm doing that virtue signaling of like, yes, I was 5 a.m. You know what I was doing? I was seeing a patient this morning. So proud of that, right? I've noticed that when I don't schedule in the exercise, even the meals, I'm notorious for skipping lunch, right? And as much as it's, I guess, for longevity, and no, it's because I didn't really plan it. And so how to fit in that IRL part and how to nurture and kind of continue to create enjoyment in your interpersonal relationships, I think is a central problem in the modern world right now. As you mentioned earlier, there's so much kind of value on controversy, on polarization, on argument. And so, this idea of, hey, really kind of doing a 180 and like, let's work on connecting, let's work on finding common ground, let's work on embracing one another. It's a challenge, but I think people are up to it. I'm trying to think of the Las Vegas solutions for your brother here. And I'm thinking about that because I had a patient this morning, wonderful guy I've worked with for years. And it was really meaningful for me to see him. He just had his second child. And it's a bit of a situation, I think, like your brother. And we were talking, and he's in a stage of life now where with 2 young kids, some of that stuff, going out with friends, going to concerts, going out for a weekend, it's just, it's not going to be as present in his life. And I think, again, there's reason to start with self-awareness is to really appreciate what's in front of you. If you've got a young family and that's what you're focused on, one, that's really the right focus, but 2, it's sort of a brief period in your life, right, where the socializing is around, like, I don't know, having a nice dinner with the family, or making sure everybody gets some chance to share and talk about how they're doing, or engaging in reading and puzzles and games. And so it's a very different type of, in some ways like the IRL is for your brother and his partner, with their kids, and then with
that's an important reminder.
Yeah, and with each other, right? Because part of having kids and forming a family, I mean, for me, it was so different than what I expected, which surprised me. I was a camp counselor. I'm like a physician, right? I know about development, but the process of parenthood and the way that it brought my wife and me much closer, but also what it evoked for me, it's something that it just merits our attention. And so, but I appreciate the question of like, how do we fit it in? And I think my answer is create intentional structure. Climbing gym is one I hear about, where people kind of go, they exercise, they interact a little bit socially, they see some folks they know, and they head back to home. And then other ones I hear about are fun things like, I don't know, book clubs. Max, why don't guys have book clubs?
I don't know. It's a good question. I have a friend my friend Matt Nathanson. He's a singer-songwriter.
Okay.
Super talented guy. He launched a book club. He's my only friend who, I guess he not only partakes in it, but he's the president of it, I suppose.
Well, I feel like all the book clubs I know, it's like all women, and I don't think it. But
it's interesting. That's probably why he's my only male friend for the book club. Yeah, why I don't have more.
Well, just as an example of a way of creating some structure around engaging with people in your community, ideally, I think we all need a reminder of the importance of that. And I would say what's nice about these tenants is everybody knows they feel good. Everybody knows, like, when you're out with a group that you feel connected to, you feel you belong, you feel they care about you care about them. And that's like one of the best feelings of being a human.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm in a few online communities that I kind of generally will lurk semi-anonymously in, but like one of them is because I just had back surgery, so one of them is a Facebook group it's like a support group for people with artificial disc replacement, which is what I had. So it's like an online. It's not really much of a community. That's a bit of an overstatement, but it's I feel connected some way, ambiently, to this larger group of people going through similar things as I went through. I lurk sometimes, and I've partaken in this other message board online. It's like a web message board.
Why are you making yourself a lurker? I mean, it's such a pejorative word. I think you're maybe passive in these groups. Yeah. You're listening.
Yeah,
I don't know that you're lurking. You're listening.
But it's cool. It's cool that these like niche communities do exist, and that you can be a part of something larger than yourself, no matter how, specific your interests may seem.
I wonder if you're also alluding to some of these parts of the modern world that are good for us, where, for example, if you have, back surgery like you did, or what I see in my world is where people have mental health concerns or mental health conditions, and they can listen to a community, right, with bipolar disorder or depression, and begin to see in the comments things that resonate with them, or solutions that they like, or experiences that sound familiar. And so I think about these types of groups in some ways as, I would say, like sitting a little bit in between, where they support us and they don't take a lot of energy. One that I'm involved with, there's a psychopharmacology listserv, a lot of folks who trained at Columbia. And so it's a lot of people I know, some of my old mentors, right? But when you're kind of struggling with something with a patient, you can post here and you'll have like some of the top psychiatrists in the country like quickly respond. And it's just one, the information is great, but two, sometimes the feeling I have like, hey, I'm struggling with this, or I need a referral here, and your colleagues reach out to you, or reach out and respond. It just feels great. It feels like, you're part of something. It shows you are part of something. So I like this idea of, maybe for folks listening, if your online world is a lot of controversy, you're not involved in a group with, some stuff you like, it might be good to maybe swap out lurking in the comments section for listening in a group that, especially anything that you're struggling a little bit with. I find that to be really, it's good to know you're not alone in that.
100%. Is there a common belief about mental fitness that you think is completely wrong?
Yeah, that it's not needed. I think that we need to shake things up in how we think about mental health in America. And I think that we're getting a little misdirected. I think that we have a lot of treatments that work. I think we have a lot of things that we know a lot about the safety of. Look at antidepressant drugs. This is the most scrutinized medication class ever in the history of medicines. And so I get worried, and the part that I guess concerns me is that people aren't taking mental fitness seriously enough. I mean, it's a new concept, but the idea, again, that our mental health is something that, you don't need to worry about until you get mental illness. That stance is not paying attention to the statistics. I don't mean to say that we all have mental health problems by any means, but, just look at the stats, like 1 in 2 men will struggle with a substance use disorder in their lifetime. I just said earlier, 20% of adolescents every year are going to get depression. So just imagine you have a group of 5 people, and every year you've got to pick one. After 4, 5, 6, 10 years, you've picked everybody, right? Everybody's struggled in some way. And so, I hope that the empowering message comes through in this book. I think in an era where there's so much fear-mongering and so much misinformation and concern, I hope to be a bit of a clear voice of saying, hey, like this stuff will help, and I can't know for individuals exactly which of these tenets will help the most or be most impactful, but I do know they're good places to spend time and spend effort because they have a big payoff.
Well, your voice is very much appreciated and sorely needed. So thank you for doing what you do.
Thanks, Max.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to catch up. One last question for you before we get to that. Where can people pick up your new book? And I know you're very active on social media, so maybe drop your social handles.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Drew Ramsey MD, pretty much everywhere. DrewRamseyMD.com is my website. There's an e-course that also people can check out, a kind of longer version of the book. The book's available in bookstores everywhere. Healing the Modern Brain, 9 Tenets to Build Mental Fitness and Revitalize Your Mind. And everybody, that's what I hope for. I really hope it revitalizes your mind, that it pulls you into a framework by which you are really attending to the self, accentuating the self, connecting with other people. The last tenet, Max, is purpose. So the idea that you build on these things and engage in a more purposeful life, that's my hope for everybody listening, and I hope this book helps you get there.
Glorious. Well, the last question that gets asked to everybody I know you've been on the show a bunch of times already, but I love to see how the answer changes episode to episode. What does living a genius life mean to you?
Oh boy, a genius life for me is, I can tell you, because I feel like right now I'm getting to live it. Well, you wake up in the morning next to somebody that you adore and love, and you make that person coffee. That's really probably one of the best moments of my day. And then as you sit there enjoying your dark roast and getting a little chatty, and exploring maybe what somebody dreamt that night, that's just an absolutely wonderful way to start the day. You then get some early daytime light, as we talked about earlier, and a healthy breakfast. My breakfasts are pretty simple.
What does a typical breakfast look like for you?
Typical breakfast, we're going to go eggs.
I mean, you are the brain food nutritional psychiatry master, after all.
I think the challenge with breakfast a lot of times is getting in veggies and getting in protein. I find that if I don't get a good amount of protein in the morning and some fat in the morning, I find myself very kind of gnawing hunger mid-morning. So I'm big about like oatmeal with lots of nuts and berries is a fun one. As I've gotten older, I'm experimenting a little bit more with like protein powder in my like fun buckwheat waffles that I like to make.
Collagen, that's a no-brainer. Collagen mixes so easily into pretty much everything.
Yeah, I'm so, but I think instead of going through the day-to-day, Max, I think to answer or the kind of minute-to-minute in a genius life type of day, I think the attributes for me of a genius life, and then I'm feeling more as I turned 50. That's the big difference since our last encounter, and for me, it's really about a mood state. It's feeling present. It's feeling engaged and connected. It's feeling the sense of these tenets kind of flowing through my life, whether it's, one that I'm working on because I got to upgrade my nutrition because I'm going to come and see Max and I got to walk the talk, or whether it's, that I'm just being more engaged. Engagement's been a big one for me. I got here to LA yesterday, and it's kind of, in that post-flight in the hotel room, kind of, wondering what to do, a little anxious, and they have free bikes at the hotel. So I just like hopped on and off I went. And within a minute or two, my whole mental state shifted. I felt really like engaged around me. I felt like I was really doing the right thing to get myself kind of jazzed up for the interviews and get ready to prep and have a good night's sleep. So, there's a long-winded answer to your very simple question, what's a genius life to you? And I think the short answer is, to me, a genius life is one in which you are building mental fitness and engaged in that on a daily basis. And I hope this talk inspires everyone out there listening to get at it and to get a little bit more of that in your life.
Get at it. Hear, hear. Well, thanks again for coming out.
Thanks, Max. Great to see you.
Dr. Drew Ramsey, you are the man, and appreciate you.
Thanks, man. It's great to see you again.
Likewise. Thank you guys for listening. Share this episode around with friends and loved ones who might benefit from it. And wishing you all peak mental fitness. Hey, if you like that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.